My name is Sarah. I'm not going to tell you which village I'm from, only that it sits somewhere quiet in Yemen, the kind of place where nothing ever happens, where the biggest news of the week is a wedding or a funeral. I want you to remember that word, funeral, because everything I'm about to tell you begins with the dead, and it does not end with them. I used to wash the bodies of the dead. It was not a job I chose out of curiosity, and it was not something I did for money. It was something I inherited, the way you inherit your mother's eyes or your grandmother's hands. And I promise you, by the end of this story, you will understand why I don't do it anymore, why I will never do it again, why I sold my house and left everything behind rather than spend one more night in that village. This is my story. Every word of it is true. I lived it. Let's begin. To understand what happened to me, you need to understand where it started. Not with the woman, not with the morgue. It started decades earlier in my grandmother's house with a little girl sitting cross-legged on the floor, listening. In our religion, before a body is buried, it must be washed, cleaned, prepared with care and with dignity so that the person can be sent to God in the right way, in the proper way, wrapped and ready, as if you were preparing someone for a journey rather than a grave. This is not something strange to us. It is not something frightening. It is considered an honor, a final act of kindness that the living perform for the dead, one last service before the earth closes over them. My grandmother did this work for most of her life, and when I was a child, I would sit and listen to her talk about it the way other grandmothers talk about cooking or sewing. Calm, practical, sometimes even proud, she told me it was a good deed, a favor, that washing the dead and sending them off properly was one of the most generous things a person could do for another human being, because the dead cannot thank you, they cannot pay you back, you do it purely because it is right. But she also told me other things, smaller things, things I filed away in the back of my mind without really understanding them, the way children do. She told me that sometimes in the morgue, strange things happen. A hand might twitch, a body might seem to cough or shift or exhale, and she always explained it the same way, calm as anything. The muscles don't know yet that the person is gone. Nerves fire for a little while after death. It's normal, she said. It's science, not spirits. Nothing to be afraid of. I believed her. I believed her for years. I believed her, in fact, right up until the night that woman's eyes followed me across the room. My grandmother passed away when I got older. I got married in that same village, the only place I had ever really known, and I became an Arabic teacher. I taught in the mornings, and by early afternoon, my work was done. The rest of the day just sat there, empty, in front of me. You have to understand what it's like to live in a village like mine. There is no cinema, no mall, no coffee shop to sit in with friends for hours. There is your house, your neighbors, your family, and long, long stretches of silence in between. I was bored. Not sad, just bored. The kind of boredom that eats at you slowly, day after day, until you start looking for anything to fill the hours. So I thought about my grandmother. I thought about the work she used to do and how she spoke about it, not with fear, but with a kind of quiet pride. And I decided, almost casually, the way you might decide to take up gardening or sewing, that I would take up her old work, not as a career, just as something to do, a way to be useful, a way to fill the afternoons. I had no idea what I was walking into. The call came at 1 in the morning. I want you to sit with that for a second. 1 a.m. in a small village where everyone sleeps early because there's nothing to stay awake for. A phone ringing at 1 in the morning is not a normal thing. It's the kind of sound that makes your stomach drop before you even answer it. It was my colleague, the man who handled the washing for male bodies, since men and women are washed separately by someone of the same sex. His voice was urgent, apologetic, tired. There was a woman. She had died, and her family was waiting, desperate really, to have her washed so they could bury her as soon as possible. That's tradition too. We don't like to delay a burial. He told me he'd already called another woman, one who normally helped with this kind of work. She had gone. She had walked into that morgue and walked right back out. She told him she felt something, a bad energy. She told him she felt something, a bad energy. She refused to go near the body. Now, if you've never worked around death the way I had, you might think that's a strange thing for a grown woman to say. But if you have worked around death, you know that people who do this kind of work for years develop a sense for things, an instinct. They don't spook easily. They've seen the strange muscle twitches, the small sounds, all the things my grandmother explained to me as simple biology. So when a woman like that refuses a body and says she feels a bad energy, that should have meant something to me. It didn't, not that night. I was tired. I was groggy, and honestly, I was a little lazy. It was the middle of the night after all, but I didn't want to say no. Refusing felt wrong. This was supposed to be an honor, remember? A duty. I couldn't leave a dead woman unwashed because I wanted to sleep. I woke my husband. I told him where I was going, the way I always did. This had become routine for us by then. Nothing new, nothing that usually worried either of us. He nodded, half asleep, and I got dressed and left. It's a small village. 10 minutes, maybe less, and I was pulling up outside the morgue, and that's when I felt it for the first time. I don't know how else to describe it except to say I had never felt anything like it before in my life. A feeling, a weight in the air, something pressing against me before I had even opened the car door. If you've ever walked into a room and instantly known, on some level below, thought that something was wrong, that's what this was, except stronger, heavier. I sat there for a second. I thought about the woman who had refused this job hours earlier. I thought about her words, a bad energy, and for a moment I almost understood exactly what she meant. But I told myself the same thing I always told myself. This is normal work. This is something I do all the time. I am not going to let a dead woman go unwashed because of a feeling. So I got out of the car and I walked inside. The family was there when I arrived. Only women, which made sense given the circumstances, but something about them was off from the very first moment. I want you to picture this scene with me, a small room, dim light, a group of women standing near a body that belongs, presumably, to someone they loved. And nobody was crying, no tears, no sobbing, no quiet prayers under their breath, nothing, just silence and a stillness that didn't match the room they were standing in. I didn't think much of it at the time. Grief affects people differently, I told myself. Some people cry, some people go numb, some people simply stand there in shock. So I did what I always did. I asked which of them wanted to help me with the washing, because in our tradition, family members often assist. They said no, all of them. Every single one refused. Again, I brushed it off. Maybe they were scared. Maybe it was too much for them. People react strangely around death. I had seen it before. So I didn't push. I walked into the room where her body was waiting, and I began preparing everything I needed. The water, the cloth, the soap, everything laid out the way it always was. And that's when the feeling came back. Worse this time. Like someone was standing directly behind me. Like someone was watching every single movement of my hands. I want to be honest with you. I was used to strange feelings in that line of work. Morgues are quiet places, and quiet places play tricks on your mind. So I told myself it was nothing. I had felt uneasy before, and it had always passed. I moved her body onto the bed we used for washing. Her eyes were open. I reached down gently and closed them, the way you're supposed to. It's a simple, respectful gesture. Nothing unusual about a body's eyes being open when they arrive. It happens more often than you'd think. I turned to begin washing her, and when I looked back at her face, her eyes were open again. But this time, they weren't staring at the ceiling like before. They had shifted to the right, as if she were looking at something in the room. I remember standing there for a moment, just staring at her face, trying to convince myself that I had simply not closed them properly the first time. That's possible, right? Eyelids don't always want to stay shut. It's a common thing in this line of work. I closed them again, more firmly this time, and I moved on. I needed to turn her onto her side to wash her back, a normal part of the process. But when I tried to shift her, she wouldn't move. I want you to understand something about this. I had washed heavier women before, much heavier, and I had never once struggled the way I struggled with her, even though her body wasn't particularly large. It was like trying to move something bolted to the table, like the weight of her had multiplied far beyond what her frame should have allowed. I remember my arms shaking with the effort. I remember thinking, this doesn't make sense, and pushing that thought away as fast as it came because I needed to finish. I needed to get out of that room. And then, as I kept working, I started to hear them. Voices. Not one voice. Many. Overlapping, quiet, indistinct, like a crowd of people speaking just outside a door, except there was no door and there was no crowd. Just me, her body, in that room, in shadows. Moving along the walls, at the edges of my vision, the kind of movement that vanishes the instant you turn your head toward it. I had never, not once in all my years doing this work, experienced anything like it. Every time I moved, her eyes would follow me. Not stayed open, followed. Tracked me the way a living person's eyes track someone walking across a room. I prayed. Quietly, under my breath, the way you do when you're trying to hold yourself together and keep your hands steady. I prayed for the strength to finish. I prayed for it to be over quickly, and somehow I did finish. I don't fully remember the last few minutes of it. I think my mind was doing everything it could to get through the task without breaking. When it was done, I walked back out to where the family was still standing. I asked them, as is customary, if they wanted to come see her one last time before she was prepared for burial. A final goodbye. They refused again. And that was the moment something in me snapped, just a little. I was exhausted, shaken, though I hadn't admitted that to myself yet, and more than a little angry. I looked at them and I said, sharper than I meant to, "This is the last time you'll ever see her. Who is this woman to you?" One of them, I remember this clearly, pointed to two young girls standing off to the side, silent like all the rest. "It's their mother," she said. And then, without another word, all of them turned and left. I stood there in that room alone, and I remember thinking, not about the eyes, not about the shadows, not even about the voices, but about this. What kind of life had this woman lived that not one person wanted to look at her face one final time, not even her own daughters? I went home that night. I didn't tell my husband everything, just that it had been a hard job, a strange one. I went to sleep. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't even the beginning. Weeks went by, normal weeks. I taught my classes, I came home, life went back to its quiet, boring rhythm, and I genuinely started to forget about that night. I want you to understand that I wasn't living in fear during this time. I had almost convinced myself the whole thing had been nothing but exhaustion and imagination. Then came the dream. I was asleep, deep asleep, and I saw her, the woman I had washed. Except in the dream, she was burning, her body engulfed, and yet somehow still standing, still moving, completely unbothered by the flames consuming her. She was pointing at something, a tomb, gesturing at it insistently, the way you'd wave someone over to come look at something urgent, something important. Come see what's on it. And I felt myself being pulled toward it. Not walking, pulled, like something invisible had hold of me and was dragging me across the ground toward that tomb, and I could not stop it, and I could not wake up. My husband woke me by shaking my shoulders. He told me afterward that I had been shaking violently in my sleep and that I was biting down on my own tongue hard enough that he could hear it. He said my body was doing things he had never seen before. I sat up, shaken, and told him it was just a bad dream. I genuinely believed that. I want to be clear. Even after everything with the eyes and the weight of her body and the voices in that room, I still told myself it was just a nightmare. Nightmares happen. This means nothing. Weeks passed again. And once more, I let myself forget. This is the part of the story I still have trouble talking about. It was an ordinary afternoon. I had come home from work and my husband was going to be late, so I decided to lie down and rest until he returned. We planned to eat lunch together when he got home. Nothing unusual, nothing that felt like the beginning of anything. I fell asleep, and then, suddenly, I woke up. My room was full of children, not 2 or 3. The entire room from wall to wall packed with small figures that, at first glance, looked like children. But the moment I actually focused on them, really looked, I understood, with a kind of cold, sinking horror, that they were not children at all. Their faces were wrong, not injured, not deformed in any way I could name. Just wrong, in a way that some part of my brain recognized immediately as something that should not exist, and right beside me, close enough that I could have reached out and touched it. There was one of them with a long, oval-shaped face. No nose, no lips, no mouth at all that I could see, just one eye. I wanted to run. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to move, to get up, to get away. But I couldn't. I could not move a single muscle. I was completely frozen, fully conscious, fully aware of everything happening around me, and utterly unable to do anything about it. I tried closing my eyes. I told myself, maybe this is a nightmare. Maybe if I just squeeze my eyes shut, I'll wake up and it will be over. But it wasn't a nightmare. I could still feel the room around me. I could still feel it, the thing beside me, getting closer. I felt its breath. I knew without opening my eyes that if I looked, its face would be inches from mine. I don't know how long I lay there like that. It felt endless. Eventually, somehow, I drifted into an exhausted sleep despite everything, and when I woke again, I saw my husband across the room. He was watching television, but he had turned the volume down, careful not to wake me. For one small moment, I let myself feel relieved, safe, normal. And then I saw her, the woman, sitting on her knees beside me, watching me the exact same way those strange eyes had watched me in the morgue. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. My body simply would not respond to anything I told it to do. I tried, desperately, to force myself back to sleep, to escape into unconsciousness, anything to get away from what was happening. And then I felt it. Hair brushing softly against my face. Her hair. Her burned, ruined body from the dream, somehow here, somehow real, somehow touching me. When I woke up again, it was late, and my husband was standing in the doorway, staring at me, terrified. I moved toward him. I don't even remember deciding to. My body just did it. And he ran, not stepped back, ran, like he had seen something that made every survival instinct in him fire at once. I called out to him. I asked him what was wrong. He told me later, once he'd calmed down enough to speak, that something in that house, and specifically, something about me, had been wrong, that I hadn't looked like myself. That for a moment, standing in that doorway, he hadn't seen his wife at all. He had seen a burnt woman, long hair, standing where I had been standing. I ran to the mirror the moment he told me. I looked at my own reflection, heart pounding, terrified of what I might see. There was nothing there but me, my own face, my own ordinary, tired eyes staring back. But it didn't matter what I saw. It mattered what he saw. And in that moment, I understood exactly who or what had been standing in my house wearing my face. It was her, the woman I had washed. My husband ran out of the house that night, and it took a long time before he was calm enough to come back inside. When he finally did, I told him everything. Every detail I have told you tonight. The eyes that followed me, the impossible weight of her body, the voices, the shadows, the burning woman in my dream, the children that weren't children, the single eye beside me in the dark. He listened to all of it without interrupting once. The next day, we went to see a sheikh, a religious scholar, someone trained in these matters far beyond anything either of us understood. We told him everything. And he told us to look into her, the woman I had washed, not just her death, her life, her past. So we did. We asked around, we searched, and what we found explained everything. She had been a witch. The eyes that followed me that night in the morgue. The sheikh told us those weren't simply the eyes of a dead woman refusing to stay closed. They were her demons, watching through her, using her body as a kind of anchor, waiting to be freed. The impossible weight I couldn't lift, the voices, the shadows crawling along the walls of that room, all of it, according to him, was them, her attendants, whatever you want to call them, present in that room the entire time I worked, watching me prepare her for a burial that, in some way none of us fully understood, released them. And the tomb from my dream, the one she kept pointing to, desperate for me to see. The sheikh explained that she had used tombs, graves, burial sites as places to perform her magic. That dream wasn't random. It was her showing me exactly where her power had lived. And the children, the ones that filled my room that day, the thing with one eye and no mouth that lay beside me in the dark, those were her demons, set loose the moment her body was properly washed and prepared, free now, with nowhere left to belong to, searching for somewhere new to attach themselves, somewhere new to go. We sold our home not long after that. I want you to understand what that means in a place like mine. That house wasn't just a building, it held our whole life, our marriage, our routines, every ordinary evening we had ever spent together. And we walked away from all of it because staying there had become unbearable. Even after we left, it didn't end cleanly. I kept having dreams. I kept feeling pain in my body that I couldn't explain, couldn't trace to any illness, any injury, any cause a doctor could put a name to. And I made a decision that I have never once regretted. I stopped washing the dead, forever. My grandmother did this work for most of her life and never once encountered anything like what happened to me. Maybe she was luckier. Maybe the years protected her in some way I don't understand. Or maybe, and this is the thought that stays with me late at night, even now, maybe some of the dead are not like the others. Maybe some of them are never fully gone. I don't know who that woman really was in life. I don't know what she did, who she hurt, what she called into that village of ours before she died. Her own daughters wouldn't look at her one last time. Her own family refused to touch her. Now, whenever I think back to that night, I think about the moment I asked them who she was and the silence that answered me before those two words finally came, their mother. I don't tell this story for attention. I tell it because it happened to me, every part of it, exactly the way I've told you tonight. And I tell it as a warning, too, to anyone who does the kind of work I used to do. Trust the feeling in your chest before you walk through that door. Trust the person who refuses to go near a body and says she feels something wrong. I didn't listen to that warning the first time. I will spend the rest of my life making sure I never ignore one again.